All right, so it may seem odd to some, but MSC has actually become one of our favorite cruise lines to be able to go on. And last year we had the opportunity to really go on the full spectrum of MSC. Everything from what was at the time was their newest ship in the fleet, the MSC World America, all the way to their oldest ship, which was the MSC Armonia.
That raised an interesting question for us. How different does the vibe feel when you're sailing in the Caribbean on a massive brand new ship versus sailing in Europe on a much smaller and older one?
Hi, I'm Jan.
And I'm Tracey, and we recently completed a 7-night Adriatic cruise aboard the MSC Armonia.
Now, we believe that cruising is a very personal experience, and we totally understand that two people coming off the very same ship from the very same cruise can have completely different impressions.
And so this is just our observations from our 7-night cruise on the MSC Armonia.
And as we do in all of our reviews, what we're going to do is we're going to go through several key categories, and then we're going to finish by looking at the 3 things we really loved about the MSC Armonia and the 3 things that we wish that MSC would have done a little bit better.
And so the categories that we're going to cover is the embarkation, the ship, our cabin, the service, the food, the entertainment, and finally our itinerary.
Now, before embarkation day, we had the opportunity to go to our favorite Greek city, Thessaloniki. If you haven't been to Thessaloniki, you need to go. Before we headed back to Athens to return our rental car and then proceed to the Piraeus port in order to get onto the ship.
Now, normally we would take a taxi when we were going from the port to the airport or vice versa. And this time, because we were in Athens, the option was to take a taxi, which would run between $75 to $100 and take between an hour to an hour and a half, depending on traffic. But we learned that you can take the metro all the way from the Athens airport to the port of Piraeus for €9 per person. And that trip was right about an hour. We felt that the metro was very safe, and when we got on and off, it wasn't really crowded.
Yeah, now the metro is going to drop you off right in the central square of Piraeus, which is a really great location, but it is just a little bit further than we would want to walk with luggage. So we took another taxi that only took about 5 minutes to get to the port and cost another €5. So really, this is a great way to be able to get from the Athens airport all the way to the Piraeus port very easily and, quite frankly, a whole lot cheaper.
While the ground transportation was not really a problem, we did think we were going to have a problem with embarkation because we had been cruising up until that point and we could not get on our MSC and Me app, which means we couldn't unload our embarkation documents. All we had was our boarding confirmations, and that is what we took with us when we went to boarding day.
Yeah, now fortunately, the way that MSC does its European itineraries really kind of worked in our favor.
So unlike in the Caribbean, in Europe, MSC doesn't do just one stop where everybody gets on and off. Rather, they have kind of like a bus route itinerary where people get on and off at cities and ports along the way. And this cruise in particular, because it was an Adriatic cruise, the main amount of passengers started out in Venice, where we got on in Athens. And because we got on in Athens, it really wasn't that busy because there was only a few people getting on with us.
Yeah, what this meant was that while we were a bit stressed about boarding our documents because there really wasn't very many people, the terminal staff were not stressed at all. They're really nice. Probably one of some of the best attitude people in a cruise terminal I've ever met. So they just basically took our boarding confirmation that we showed them. They took our passports. They went off and did some stuff, and they came back very quickly with our key cards. And then we were off to the ship. Very, very seamless.
In fact, it only took about from the time we dropped off our luggage with the porters till we got on the ship about 25 minutes. Now, embarkation was much easier than we thought it was going to be. However, the bus route type itinerary with people getting on and off at every port does have a bit of a downside.
Now, because of that constant passenger turnover you have in Europe, MSC still requires in-person muster drills on the continent in Europe. Now, this is where they will take all the new passengers that came on board that day. Usually it's going to be in the afternoon. They'll take them to the theater. They get a short briefing on how to use your life vest. And then they're actually escorted to very tenders that they're actually assigned to, so they know where they're going to have to get off the ship if things go really, really bad. Fortunately, this entire process they have down to a science and only took about 12 minutes. So we did hear calls for passengers to go to their muster each port along the way.
But another thing that a lot of people complain about is the multiple announcements. This is a European cruise and multiple languages are represented there. We think that there was probably 5, maybe 6, but English on our particular cruise was first, so we could tune the rest out.
Yeah, and usually what Tracey and I do on a European MSC cruise is we play the game is can we identify all the languages? So it really is not a big deal to us, but I understand why it could be to other Americans. Now, as we boarded the Armonia, we realized how different the Armonia was from the MSC World America. America that we had been on just like 10 days before. First of all, it's about half the size of the World America with only about 2,500 passengers.
And as we've already noted, this is a ship that was launched in 2001. So at this time, it was already 25 years old. And it did have that traditional ship architecture that a lot of people remember from their first cruises.
Yeah, in other words, it's dated. Now, we were struck that how similar the Armonia felt to our MSC Piraeus cruise. The MSC Piraeus is actually the ship we took on our 2023 World Cruise, which we were around the world for 118 days. So because we had that association, it really kind of felt like we were coming back home.
Well, maybe to our 1970s home, because there were lots of purples, lots of greens and blues, which they decorate the many different lounges. And again, this was a ship that had been refurbished in 2019, but it still felt dated. And beyond the color palette, however, we did like how cozy and intimate the lounge spaces felt. And I think one of our favorite spots on board of the Armonia was the English pub that was called the White Lion Pub. We spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, even with its plaid carpet. Yeah. So now another difference that we found was you don't find a lot of those bell and whistles for families and kids that you find on a lot of other mass market ships. There is no big water slides or amusement style attractions. However, I really loved how they situate their pool deck. First of all, their pool decks seem to be very, very long, and so long that you have two pretty good sized adult pools. You have two hot tubs, but right next to all of this, you have a kids water park, which I thought really makes it easy for both parents and kids to be able to enjoy the water and the sun, while the parents are able to kind of keep an eye on their kids at the same time.
But on this ship, we also found something that there wasn't a lot of, and that was Americans. We were definitely the minority population on this sailing, and which for us is a great appeal. And sometimes that is something that does put off other Americans. But we kind of look at it like, after all, we are taking a cruise in Europe, we're sailing around Europe, so it kind of makes sense that we should be surrounded by lots of Europeans on and off the ship.
Now, we told you how surprised we were about how fast to getting on the ship. We also were surprised at the fact that our room was ready as soon as we got onto the ship. Now, part of this was probably due to the fact that we actually booked a suite.
A suite because we found a great deal. Now, keep in mind, there is no yacht club on the MSC Armonia. The room, however, it was comfortable, but I'd have to say it was smaller than some of the other suites we've sailed.
Yeah, like it had a good, nice balcony. However, if you looked at furniture, you have those two vinyl chairs and the ottoman / table thingy that you pretty much find on any mass market basic veranda cabin. What I was surprised about this room was how much storage it had. In fact, it had more storage than we have ever had on any MSC ship, to include multiple yacht club suites.
Just like the rest of the ship, though, the suite itself was dated. And again, this was a ship that just went through a refurbishment, a major one in 2019. Now, the bathroom wasn't bigger than any other rooms that we've been in normal verandas. And we were a little bit disappointed that in our suite that it had a tub as opposed to a walk-in shower. Now, I know that a lot of people love tubs and suites. We just don't care for those. And the one thing that was kind of a bugaboo with me was, instead of having like a glass door, it does have one of those curtains that kind of clings to you when you're taking a shower. I don't like that.
No, nor do I. All right, now, service aboard, just like the room had its hits and misses, the service aboard was hit and misses, but not with the actual wait staff. Our room steward, the dining room waiters, the bar waiters, the bartenders were all excellent.
I mean, for example, on the very first day, by the end of the first day, our waiters already knew our drink preferences. We like sparkling water, we don't like still water, and they knew that we didn't like things like bread delivered to our table.
Yeah, that's because, by the way, we love bread too much, and we're not responsible enough to stop eating it. So usually the first night, what we'll do is we'll say, hey, listen, we don't need the bread. Usually we have to say this multiple times. After the first time saying it, they just knew. And it was that type of understanding your customer and giving your service that actually meets that. Now, like I said, we've always found that the MSC wait staff on MSC, quite frankly, is as good as you're going to find on any cruise line. They're helpful, they're kind, they're really trying to be proactive. However, we've also found that in Europe, as great as the wait staff is, those who work at the guest and destination services are a completely different story. On 2 occasions, I went to their desk, the destinations desk and then the excursions desk, simply to ask a question. I think one was about what was the availability of shuttles at the port, and the other concerned a benefit related to our Blue Diamond status with MSC. Yet, with 2 different individuals at both of these desks, the reaction was first to become defensive. And then they went on and said, hey, listen, I, as the customer, should have understood this information well before coming on board. I just don't know why a line that has such great wait staff has such abysmal staff working their guest and destination services.
Now, food was also another mixed experience. Honestly, our first day on the ship, we found the lunch to be at best okay. So again, we were suite guests, which meant we got private dining in the La Pergola, which was really kind of a combination between a buffet and an a la carte menu. But we found that was, it was okay. And that first dinner, it was disappointing. It was just really bland.
And apparently we were not the only ones who at this point had reservations to the food. Our second day on the ship was actually a sea day, and they had a captain's reception just for Diamond and Blue Diamond guests. Now remember, this was our second day, but everyone else on the ship had been on for 3, 4, 5, 6 days. So we were kind of the newcomers. Well, at the welcome party, the captain was there, he's pretty much a character. He would talk to us for like 20 minutes, and at one point he asked, well, how's the food? Now, you could tell how he asked it. He thought everyone would say yes, okay, kind of a crowd pleaser. However, it was followed by utter silence.
Like the food on board the ship or not? Be honest. Check, they don't like.
Now, you heard the captain there say, okay, we need to work on that. And they did. I will say that the main dining room for the dinner actually was much better for the rest of the cruise, although lunches in the dining room were still pretty bland.
And so there are two main dining rooms on the Armonia, the Marco Polo and the La Pergola. And again, suite guests, we got to do anytime dining, and we were in La Pergola. And that also was a nice thing because it was a much smaller area, and we did get to have our own table. And for us, that was kind of nice.
Now, while these two main dining rooms, even La Pergola, were actually pretty large, there were no specialty restaurants, and the buffet is very, very small. In fact, there's not a lot of seating, so the seating kind of pulls out into the El Girasol outdoor sitting area, and that's fine, except for whenever it is raining or cold, which we had on that. It tends to be a little bit problematic.
And beyond being small, we really weren't impressed with the food in the La Brasserie buffet. Again, we had just come from the MSC World America, and the buffets there were amazing. The fruit there were so many different varieties, and it seemed like everything was kind of as minimal as you could get on food selection within the buffet. And the buffet itself also spilled out to its outside cousin area, the Il Girasol, and that's where you're going to find your burgers and MSC's famous pizza.
Yeah, famous pizza, because we've always said that MSC, we thought, along with Explorer Journeys, which is owned by MSC as well, has some of the best, if not the best pizza at sea. However, here, the pizza was at best okay. That was really disappointing as well.
And after dinner, we did think that there was plenty of opportunities for entertainment. And again, having just come from the World America, the entertainment just really didn't hit the mark here. It was okay. It wasn't really inspiring, and we get this. So MSC in Europe has to appeal to a wide variety of clientele. So everything was kind of just generic song and dance reviews and aerial lists that you didn't have to use a lot of language, so there wouldn't be a lot of people lost along the way.
Yeah, while we weren't really big on the theater shows, we loved going to the lounges, because we found that the lounges on the ship, and there was actually several of them, were energized before and after dinner, and it seemed like you had performers in each one of the lounges, and they were all different styles of music, so you had somewhere to go wherever your musical tastes were. And what was even better was actually they were pretty full. You had people who were always there, they were listening, they're out on the dance floor, really just having a great time. We really loved the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think we really loved the nighttime entertainment at the White Lion Pub the best. I think that had the best for us. Yeah. But as suite guests, we received complimentary access to the Orea Spa. And again, this is a small spa. It's complimentary. It did have a Turkish hammam, it had a Finnish sauna, and it had a steam room, but it didn't have the other big trappings of a spa like a thalassotherapy pool or a jacuzzi. But this was also a port-intensive cruise, so honestly, even if we'd wanted to, we really wouldn't have had the time to visit, just because we were out in the ports all day long.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go a couple times, especially the sea days, and we really enjoyed ourselves. And certainly, if you're a spa guest and you had the opportunity to go to the spa, or if you're a suite guest, you really enjoyed yourself. And another group that really enjoyed themselves were the kids. Now, we sailed during a time when school was in session, so there wasn't a huge number of kids on board, But they were all really enjoying themselves. Part of the reason is we really believe that MSC has some of the best kids programs at sea. They have lots of different spaces dedicated for kids, everything all the way from babies all the way up to your teenagers. And what I thought was kind of cool on the Armonia is every evening before dinner, they actually hosted in one of the lounges a party just for the kids. And they just seemed like they were all enjoying themselves, as well as the adults would actually go just to kind of watch the kids have a great time.
But for us, I think the real entertainment was the Itinerary. And this is really where this cruise shined for us. It had some super ports. I mean, these are like iconic ports. Athens and Split, Croatia, and Venice and Mykonos, and a new place for us, which was Brindisi, Italy. And we just had not been there before, and we really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Now, we only took one MSC excursion, and that was when we were at the port of Mykonos. We actually visited Delos. Now, Tracey and I had been to Delos before when we were on the Regent Navigator all the way back in 2009. We love that. If you haven't been to Delos, according to Greek mythology, is the birthplace of both Apollo and his twin sister Artemis. And we were really excited about it. The problem is the guide just wasn't as good as we hoped. I mean, she was knowledgeable, but she was one of these guys that basically talked and talked and talked and talked, not necessarily about what you're looking at. So it was kind of disconnected. So we were kind of disappointed with that. But I'll tell you what, it was still great to be able to see such historic areas. And for the other ports, we actually kind of did DIY as we do in most European ports.
And one of the nice things about this particular cruise on the Armonia was that when we did get to Venice, our Armonia ship did dock in the industrial part of Marghera, and that's at the edge of the Venice Lagoon, and that actually is a very big benefit.
Now, when you hear industrial lagoon, you don't think of much, but you have to understand, here's what the benefit of going to Marghera is, the fact that it is probably the closest you can dock right there to Venice than any other mass market or even most premium lines. The reason is because usually you're having to, when you say Venice, you're actually going to Ravenna or you're going to Trieste, and that's a 2.5 hour bus ride there. For us in the Armonia, there at the port we were at, quite frankly, once getting off the Armonia gangway, we walked 20 minutes, we got onto a water taxi, we took a water taxi for 20 minutes, and we were dropped off right in front of St. Mark's Square. That is a really a good way to get into Venice.
Now, we had mentioned that we got to go to Brindisi, which was a new port for us, and unfortunately, this was one of the things that was kind of disappointing was our time there was really limited. I guess we didn't check that close, but by the time we got to Brindisi, we realized we were only going to be there for a few hours, and we got there at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So it was nice to be able to go and see a new place, but it was right before sunset, which was lovely. But everything was closing up or closing, so it would have been a place that I would think we would have really enjoyed more time at. And if we go back there, we'll definitely spend more time than we did this last time.
Absolutely. All right. So those are our observations of the embarkation process, the ship, the food, the service, the entertainment, and that wonderful itinerary.
So let's look at those things that we liked the most about the MSC Armonia and our Adriatic and Greek cruise. And then we'll look at those 3 things that we wish they could have done better. And
we're going to start off with those 3 things that we wished that MSC would have done a little bit better. And the first is the so-so food, as well as the absence of specialty restaurants. While the food quality improved, the choices were still constrained, and the best we can say was it was not bad. And that's about the best we can say about the food.
And our second down, I'd have to say, would be the in-person muster drill. And again, this is because of that rolling embarkation that happens that we got to experience tangentially 4 of the 7 days that we were on the ship, because while the muster itself does run efficiently, once you get your new participants in the theater start to finish 12 minutes, it's the time before the drill, the announcements that are happening every 5 to 10 minutes to get those last minute stragglers, which means it's kind of interrupting to the people around the ship. So we were up on the pool deck enjoying music, but they would stop the music, they stopped the bar service, they're checking people's cards over and over again. Oh, you need to go back to the muster. It was a little bit disrupting, but it is a down, I'd say.
Yeah. Now, the third down we have, quite frankly, we should have put as number 1 down, and that was the staff at the guest and destination services. While, again, the rest of the wait staff was fantastic, the staff at the guest services, the excursions desk, the only thing they offered was unhelpfulness and crudeness.
But there were a lot of things that we did love about our cruise on the Armonia, and I'm going to go with the first big up, the value. We were in a suite. We had a full premium drink package. We had unlimited Wi-Fi. We had thermal access. This was all included. And for the two of us, it was right around $3,500. It was a great deal.
Yeah, and the second up for this was the Itinerary. The Itinerary was pretty much the reason why we really wanted to book this anyway. We were able to revisit Venice and Split. These are two ports we've been to before. We just absolutely love. We were able to go back to Mykonos, which we hadn't been to for quite some time, and go to Delos. And we were able to discover Brindisi for the first time. I love the ports. The ports really were the highlight of this cruise. We just wish we would have had a little bit more time in some of the ports.
And our third big up really is the European vibe. And this is kind of a personal thing, so you may or may not like that as an American. It might not be for everyone, but what we loved is while we're in Europe, while we're sailing through Europe, you don't come back to your mass market American-based cruise line and be surrounded by your American bubble of people, because you can do that in the Caribbean. We had that European experience, not only in port, but we had it back on board, and that is something that we do enjoy.
All right, so overall, this really was a great cruise, which we really enjoyed. It also was we think that this is a great value for those people who want to go do a European cruise, do the Adriatic, some of the Greek Isles without breaking the bank, especially if you have kids, because we do believe that because MSC is such a family-friendly line, it has some of the best kids clubs at sea, and they really kind of cater to kids, which is really kind of neat. Now, that was the MSC on the Armonia. Go on to watch this video to see a different way to be able to sail MSC, this time in the Yacht Club. And as always, until that next horizon, keep on traveling.